Hello guys, thanks for tuning in again. Today's book review, we're going to have a look at Performance Coaching by Carol Wilson. I actually saw some videos on YouTube that brought me to the attention of this book, and actually I'll put the links below of Carol Wilson's videos because they're superb. Carol originally started out at Virgin in the very beginnings, and was involved in a coaching culture of that business from the very start, which I find fascinating. And apparently it was part and parcel of Richard Branson's philosophy in terms of the family and the way that they did things, which was fantastic. Her approach is almost exactly my thought process in terms of how we look at coaching. I learnt so much from her in the videos and from this book. And what I find fascinating about this book is it talks about various different methodologies, not just necessarily one model or idea or a few. It covers the vast majority, if not, well, pretty much all of the coaching models that are current today, and assesses them, talks about their benefits and disadvantages, which I find brilliant from a driver training perspective. I love coaching anyway. It doesn't just talk about coaching, we talk about the differences between teaching, mentoring, coaching in this book, which I find brilliant, and I learned so much. As I say, it's broken down into sections in terms of what different models there are and different strategies towards it, and why we might coach or mentor somebody, and also talks about coaching is not necessarily just a skill, although it may be, and it is. It talks more about the sort of approach and the style in which you do training in terms of this book. One of the things that I took away from here, amongst thousands of other things, was about permission protocol, about asking for permission before we go into asking questions. And I found that very helpful because it engages the other individual very much with the training beforehand, and it engages them in terms of, it gives them an option rather than you just telling. One of the most fascinating sections as well for me was about how to listen, and the different levels she calls of listening, which I found extremely fascinating, which is why there are so many notes in this book, in that section particularly. And how we go about that, and why that's so important. So again, especially as we're looking more towards client-centered learning as driver trainers as part of our standards check, this is imperative, but also quite sadly really, I like to self-coach myself as well, so I find that quite helpful in terms of looking at things from a different perspective. Carol works quite closely, I believe, with another trainer or coach, Sir John Whitmore, and we're going to have a look at his book shortly, but she talks about his model, which is, I believe there's two of his models inside here, one very new one and one of his old ones, which invariably is the Grow model. And again, she'll talk inside the book about the benefits of that, disadvantages, and where to use different techniques. There are some techniques inside here which I've found particularly useful, so I definitely recommend this book. It's quite easy to read, but it takes a bit to get your head around some of the sections, and maybe to reread some sections as I did, but highly recommended, very good book. And yeah, I'd have a look at it if you're a trainer. Some of it may not necessarily fully apply to us as trainers, because it talks a little bit more about the corporate world and the way in which things in the corporate world happen, or not, as the case may be. But equally so, most driver trainers run businesses, and that would still apply to them even so. So very good. I would highly recommend it, and thank you very much, Carol, because that's a great insight into your world, which I apply pretty much every day in my training career. So thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe, please feel free to comment below, and yeah, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.